Ignition sequence starts.
Good morning. You're looking at the team on duty in the International Space Station Flight Control Room at NASA's Johnson Space Center. These specialists are monitoring all the station systems and assisting the Expedition 63 crew members as they wrap up another work week in space. Commander Chris Cassidy and flight engineers Anatoly Ivanishin and Ivan Wagner are moving ahead into the last 7 weeks or so of their mission, performing experiment operations and station maintenance as the orbiting outpost nears its 20th anniversary of continuous human habitation.
Houston Station on Space to Ground.
Welcome to Space to Ground. I'm Kayla LaFrance. This week was a busy one aboard the orbiting laboratory as the crew prepared the station for new and continued science. NASA astronaut Chris Cassidy spent part of his week setting up the Advanced Plant Habitat Facility for the next round of growth operations. That facility provides an enclosed environment to support plant and bioscience research. Logistics is a large part of keeping science experiments running on board the space station. An experiment such as the Advanced Plant Habitat require use of consumable station resources, such as water and power, in order to operate successfully. This week, 3 of the large payload racks, known as the Express racks, were moved to new locations that better accommodated their size and resource needs. We just assigned another NASA astronaut to an upcoming commercial crew mission, with more flights right around the corner. NASA's Jeanette Epps was assigned to the Starliner 1 mission, the first operational flight of Boeing's CST-100 Starliner. She'll join veteran NASA astronaut Sunny Williams and fellow first-time flyer Josh Casada on a 6-month expedition scheduled for the later part of 2021. Prior to that, Boeing is gearing up for its uncrewed orbital flight Test 2, no earlier than this December, followed by the first crew flight on Starliner, targeted for next June. Question: have you been following NASA astronaut Chris Cassidy on Twitter? You really should. The ISS commander has been busy on his social media account @astro_seal, sending down breathtaking images and heartfelt messages of various events happening on our planet from his vantage point in orbit. The power of hurricanes Laura and Genevieve, the devastation of fires in California and the Amazon, and the tragic explosion in Beirut are some of his recent postings on Twitter. Chris also captures Earth's awe and beauty with amazing views of our planet. You can follow his journey on both Twitter and Instagram. Keep sending in your questions using the hashtag AskNASA. We'll see you next time.
One priority of International Space Station science research is to learn as much as possible about how the human body is affected by living in space. Shortly before she came home last year, flight engineer Anne McLean and her crewmates wrapped up data gathering on the Airway Monitoring experiment, which examines an astronaut's exhaled breath for signs of inflammation, with the data used in the design of future spaceships to make them safer for their human crew members.
The International Space Station is a national orbiting laboratory. Every single day we are answering big questions about Earth and about space, about where we came from and about where we're going. One category of those experiments are human research, experiments on our human body, how we react in microgravity. One of the recent ones that I've been a part of is called Airway Monitoring, and this is looking at airway inflammation up in space. So when we're breathing the air, you know, the small particles in the air, they don't just fall to the ground like dust on the ground. So we tend to inhale more fine particles than we would on Earth. And so we're looking at our response, our body's response to that by measuring nitric oxide exhalations as an indicator for airway inflammation. And so understanding, you know, how clean does our air need to be? How does our body react to the air? When we talk about going back to the moon, a lot of people are aware that the moon dust is a very, very fine particle. It's almost like a powdered sugar fine particle. And if that's in the air and we're breathing that for months on end, if we're doing, extended stays on the lunar surface, we need to understand kind of how that affects the human body.
The astronauts and cosmonauts on the International Space Station serve as the laboratory assistants for researchers on Earth who are looking into a wide range of scientific concepts, including some we'll have to master in order to return American astronauts to the moon by 2024 as part of the Artemis program. For example, it will be critical to understand how to interact with regolith, the fine particles of dust that cover the moon's surface. And we're using the Hermes facility to study how regolith particles move in microgravity over a long period of time.
If you look at asteroids or if you look at the moon, you'll see this layer of regolith covering the surface. So it's this fine particles, fine dust that covers the entire surface. So what's happening is the solar system is very dynamic, and we have asteroids and meteoroids moving around and impacting different bodies. So the surface is getting bombarded all the time. So you have this fine layer of fragments on the surface. So why would we want to study it, right? And why would we want to study it on the space station? There's a lot of interest in one day sending astronauts to asteroids, for instance, and we have already sent a lot of robotic missions to asteroids and plan to send more. And so every time we visit these asteroids, we learn more and more. And there's very diverse bodies of asteroids. Every asteroid seems to be different. And so we would need to understand how to interact with the asteroid surface. So if you're going to anchor to the surface of the asteroid, for instance, you need to understand how to interact with the regolith. So asteroids are pretty small bodies, and so they have actually microgravity levels of gravity. And so this is actually what you find on the space station as well. There's 4 experiments, and each one is a tube. So it's a clear polycarbonate tube about the size of a Pringles can. And so inside this tube, we have the asteroid simulants. And so this is what we're actually studying. And so the main piece of data that we're getting is the movement of these particles. So we have a camera looking at each of these tubes. Over the course of about a year, that cassette 1 will be up there, we'll get this basically time-lapse imagery of the particles moving. And so we're looking at the long-term effects of microgravity and what's happening to the movement of the particles. Also, something that we have on asteroids is vacuum, right? So we want to expose our experiments to the vacuum of space. So we actually have our facility hooked up essentially to a port to space. We did cassette 1, but the idea is that Hermes will be open to other investigators. So cassette 2, cassette 3, cassette 7, these will be other researchers that will apply to use Hermes to do research on asteroid regolith and granular material investigations. And we think that ISS is a wonderful place to study asteroid regolith, to study lunar regolith, regolith in general. So we're excited about the opportunities that Hermes will bring for researchers in the future.
For future missions, like going back to the moon by 2024 and then on out into the solar system, biomining could offer a way for future crews to obtain needed materials on other planetary bodies. But microbes and rocks interact differently outside of Earth's gravity than they do here, and that might affect the output from extraterrestrial biomining. So, there's an investigation on the International Space Station that is studying how microbes grow on and how they interact with planetary rocks in microgravity and in simulated Martian gravity.
The International Space Station will soon host some of the smallest miners in the universe, microbes. Microbes growing on the surface of rocks can gradually break them down and extract useful minerals and metals. This is a process called biomining. As we explore space, we are seeking to use biomining to turn rock and regolith into soil for growing plants and food. But before we can use this technique in planetary settlements, we first need to test it in space. On the space station, bioreactors will be placed inside a centrifuge where microbes will grow on rocks in microgravity and simulated Martian gravity. Investigators will examine how 3 types of microbes behave within pieces of basalt and evaluate how well the different microbes extract elements from the rocks. The findings will be compared to ground-based results. We hope to gain insights into how microbes interact with rocks in microgravity and how we might use them in our exploration of deep space.
All of the experiments that International Space Station crew members work on are the brainchildren of scientists on the ground, men and women who came up with a hypothesis to test and then designed and developed an experiment to do it. In this episode of the new season of NASA Explorers, we watch as the scientists work through the last stages of getting their experiment loaded onto a SpaceX cargo ship for the trip to orbit.
You know, we're excited to see what kind of data that we collect from this first project. Any sort of data we get is going to be brand new information for us and for...
Three, 2, 1, and 0. And a liftoff of the Falcon 9 rocket and the Dragon spacecraft, packed with science and supplies for the International Space Station, humanity's home in low Earth orbit.
So we were originally scheduled to be on SpaceX 14, but about a week before launch, our project got canceled from that launch because of some issues with the controlled environment.
Science in space can be complex, and no matter how meticulously things are planned and executed, sometimes those complexities get in the way of launching on time. When equipment used to house the experiment didn't look perfect for a final pre-flight test, there was no choice but to push it to a later flight to ensure mission success.
As a first-time investigator, that was, it wasn't devastating, it was just sad that we weren't going to be able to launch because up to that point, it had taken us about 2 years to get there. Ultimately, it gave us about 6 months more time to reevaluate that controlled system and do some more groundwork to prepare for the launch in December of 2018 on SpaceX 16.
After the setback of being moved to a later launch, our team of scientists now has only days left before their experiment will be loaded into a SpaceX Dragon capsule that will carry it to the International Space Station. Elaine and Parastu, the co-founders of a biomedical startup, are at NASA's Kennedy Space Center, readying their research for microgravity.
Since this is our first project that's launching to station, this is also our first time working at the Kennedy Space Center. So it's been an exciting moment to, not just see the visitor center and go look at the touristy things, but also get past the security gate and into the actual laboratories.
While some experiments are loaded into Dragon in the weeks leading up to launch, others have more time-sensitive components. These require precise preparation and loading in the days before liftoff. For those scientists, laboratories at the Kennedy Space Center that are a part of the Space Station Processing Facility, or SSPF, become a home away from home. Here, they can carry out the critical last steps of preparing their experiments for delivery to the space station.
So we got here on a Thursday, and it's currently Sunday. Been a big day yesterday filling up these wells with gel solution and getting ready for handover at 7:30 a.m. on Monday, ahead of launch on Tuesday afternoon.
Once you arrive here, you kind of get into this other time. It's this weird little time bubble where everything is now L-based, and L being launch, and it's L minus 72, L minus 48, L minus 24, and it's just building up to the actual launch time.
With those precious remaining hours, the team is prepping their microplates for microgravity. Microplates are also used in labs on Earth, but these were specially designed to be self-contained.
My role on the project was to design the actual microplate themselves. The challenge on orbit, though, is that generally fluid experiments have to be conducted in the glove box, and the glove box is very time limited. It's very crew intensive. So we've designed this self-contained microplate that can be operated outside of the glove box. It has all of the containment to keep the fluids inside.
So we have loaded these wells with hydrogels that they were carrying drugs, and we want to actually look at the effect of microgravity and how the release of the drug is affected when we send it to the space station. So the concern that we have is that if we have bubbles that are in the wells, it may be difficult for the plate reader to be able to read the amount correctly. So we are being very careful with how we are loading the waters.
So what's left to do today, once Parastu here finishes filling the microplates, I'm going to take over and seal them up completely. Once that's done, we'll add all of the labels onto the microplates and put them in a self-contained box that is what they'll actually travel to the space station on.
3 years in the making just to get here.
Once we do that, we'll turn it over to Cold Stow. Cold Stow will take it from there, and the next time we'll see them, we'll be on orbit, and the crew's opening them up.
Cold Stow, short for cold stowage, is the team responsible for making sure that the research stays at the right temperature on its journey from the lab on Earth to the lab in space. This handoff is one of the last steps before being loaded onto the rocket. The cold stowage team will take Elaine and Parastu's experiment and keep it safe and sound before it's loaded for launch.
Does it feel like a relief?
Well, it'll feel like a relief when we actually see it take off. And then it'll be finally...
It's a huge step though.
Yeah.
It's done. It's out of our hands at this point.
Yeah. It'll be officially out of our hands when it leaves the Earth's surface. So that'll be the moment that we're finally done. Until we get data, and then we get to process it.
That's just the beginning, actually.
So what'll happen now is, now that we've handed them over to NASA, NASA will deliver, they're on their way right now out to Dragon to be loaded. And the launch hopefully will happen tomorrow at 13:38. I've been involved since the very beginning, which is approximately about 3 years ago. It's been a long road, but like everything, it's a lot of work. It's worth it. And we're excited to help Timpanogos get some data for this project.
Overall, we're going to get a lot of data from just this one project and those 2 experiments that are going to inform a lot of different things for us. All right.
It's a little windy out here today. It's a beautiful day. It's a little windy. It's got me concerned. My launch intuition is tingling a bit. It's always an awesome and amazing and special thing to see.
For almost 20 years now, during an expedition to the International Space Station, astronauts and cosmonauts spend some of their time working on science experiments and some of it taking care of their home on orbit, maybe getting to make a spacewalk. But they all devote some of their time to sharing the experience with us Earthlings. This spring, Expedition 63 Commander Chris Cassidy did just that with a group of Canadian students, and he contacted each one of them individually at their homes. Take a look at how he did it.
NO186, NO186, Juliet Oscar November calling. NO186, NO186, Juliet Oscar November calling. NO186, it is 6 Juliet Oscar November. You copy me, Chris? Copy you loud and clear. Okay, I'm going to patch them through. Please, 1 minute.
This is Owen. How has seeing Earth from its orbit affected you, in your frame of reference when moving around the ISS, or in your perspective of humanity as a whole? Over.
Hi, Owen. That's a great question. Seeing Earth from up here it's a beautiful thing. It's just this peaceful place with no borders there, and you just see this wonderful colors of blues and greens and browns and white clouds and snow-capped mountains. And it really gives you an appreciation for Earth as a spaceship for 7 billion people, just like our spaceship is keeping us alive, and how we need to take care of Earth because it takes care of us. Over.
This is Spencer. What happens if you vomit in the space station? How do you clean it up? Over.
Well, hi, Spencer. Fortunately, we are prepared for vomiting in space, and we bring special bags that if we're feeling the urge to go, we use these bags. Occasionally, on the launch, it can surprise you, and but we have bags in the launch vehicle as well. If you didn't make it in the bag, it would be a real mess, and it would go everywhere. It would take quite a bit of time to clean up. Over.
This is Lucas. How has the COVID-19 pandemic affected you while you're in space? Over.
Hi, Lucas. The pandemic has affected us because it's affecting our families. Our daily life here on the space station is largely the same with or without the pandemic. We are safe and we are executing our job and keeping the space station running and functioning and keeping ourselves healthy with our daily routine. But we're concerned for our friends and family and loved ones because they're in Russia and in the United States having to deal with it just like you are. Over.
This is Allie. What will be your first meal when you get back to Earth? Over.
Hi, Allie. I like to eat, and so I'm looking forward to any food that somebody makes. But one thing we don't have is an oven here, so something that comes out of the oven and you smell those smells and you eat a nice hot meal, that sounds terrific to me. Over.
This is Sawyer. What does it feel like when the rocket lifts off? Over.
Sawyer, when the rocket lifts off, it's this tremendous feeling like somebody's pushing you in your back and shoving you faster and faster and higher into the sky. And there's a few periods of time where our engines change, called staging, and there's some bumpiness and a little bit of shaking in the spacecraft during those periods. But the rest of the 9 minutes is just like a giant force is throwing you into the sky. Over.
This is Jordan. What does the space station smell like? Over.
Jordan, the space station has not too different smells than you'd have in a home down there. We try to keep ourselves clean. We try to keep the space station clean. In fact, tomorrow is Saturday, and that's our cleaning day, and we do our best to keep it neat and tidy. But occasionally there's smells where we have to change fluid. A lot of times that has to do with our bodily functions in the toilet, and they can be smelly there. But for the most part, the space station, to me, it smells just like a normal home. Over.
This is Eric. Was training to be an astronaut harder or easier than training to be a Navy SEAL? Over.
Well, Eric, they were totally different. The training to be a Navy SEAL initially was very hard for 6 months. Training to be an astronaut or a cosmonaut is a long process, and it takes many years of hard work. So, and it's more academic, more having to do with your brain. In SEAL training, we had some academics, but largely it was a physical thing. So 2 entirely different programs. Over.
This is Owen. What experiment that you've done had the most unexpected results? What was the expected and actual outcome of said experiment? Over.
Wow, Owen, that's a very detailed question. We have lots of experiments going on up here, but one that when I first arrived, we were growing some plants, and I thought that they would grow more than they did. Over the course of several weeks, they were just a small sprout, which surprised me because pictures I had never seen growth in space before on my previous missions. So I'm looking forward to trying that again and getting better results. Over.
This is Spencer. How successful is your 3D printer on the station? Over.
Spencer, the 3D printer has been here since I think 2015, a few years, and we've printed many parts. We don't have it deployed and active all the time, but when we need to, we can print what we need if it meets the criteria. It's a very effective way of having spare parts in space. Over.
This is Lucas. We're a model rocket building club. Did you ever build model rockets when you were young? Over.
Lucas, I wish I did, but I never had a club or a mentor in my area that was involved with model rockets, so I never really launched a model rocket as a young person, but I think it's great that you guys do. Over.
This is Allie. What does microgravity feel like on your body? Over.
Allie, microgravity is more a feel of how to move around. Your body, in my opinion, feels kind of the same. Everything you do on Earth with your body, eating, going to the bathroom, sleeping, your hair growing, all that stuff is very normal, I think. But moving around in microgravity is not normal, and it takes some practice to get used to how to do it effectively. Over.
This is Eric. Does the Earth look any clearer or less polluted now compared to when you flew in 2009 and with Canadian Chris Hadfield in 2013? Over.
I actually flew with another Canadian, your Governor General, Julie Payette, in 2009. So this is my first mission in space without a Canadian crewmate. But the Earth does not look any different with our eyes than the previous times. And my crewmate and friend Anatoly has been in space several times, and we both have tried to see any differences, and we can't really tell with our eyes. Over.
This is Sawyer. Do you play any games while you are on the ISS? Over.
Well, Sawyer, we're pretty busy people up here. We have lots of work to do during the day, and by the time nighttime comes around, we just have the energy to eat and clean up from our day and prepare for the next day, maybe make a phone call or something, or answer an email, but we don't have a lot of time to play any games. Probably the closest thing to a game is seeing how straight you can fly without crashing into a wall and how far you can go like this. Over.
Well, I tell you what, for all the folks on the phone, let's go ahead and give Commander Chris Cassidy and the crew on NA-1SS a big round of applause anyway. Sending my greetings along to all of you in traditional amateur radio terms. 7 threes, best wishes, and thank you for participating in this activity. Thank you, everybody. This is just excellent.
If you want another look at any of the stories we feature today, just point your internet machine to YouTube and Facebook. There are the particular addresses in that box. When you do, be sure to take a peek around at the other cool stuff you'll find about NASA and America's human spaceflight program. And when you're interested in good conversation about human spaceflight, the place to go is Houston We Have a Podcast, where we talk to folks about their work in all aspects of space exploration. We post new episodes every Friday. Today, Gary Jordan continues our Mars Monthly series with a great conversation about what and how to pack a spacecraft for a trip to Mars, for a trip where you can't stop for supplies along the way. Go to nasa.gov/podcasts for this week's episode. It's where you'll also find all the previous episodes. In fact, you'll find the full library of all the NASA podcasts there. You can find them all on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and SoundCloud, too.